the most vocal of the families has been the Goncalves family, Kaylee Goncalves' family. Her parents, Steve Goncalves, and his wife, Christy Goncalves, they've been incredibly vocal. They wanted the death penalty in this case. And I want to share my screen and show you what they had to say about this. They confirmed that this news was indeed true. I want to make clear too to our viewers that the courts are not confirming any information about whether or not there's going to be a hearing. There's information out there that that he will be changing his plea on Wednesday, but the courts are not confirming that. They're saying they'll have more information tomorrow. So that tells you something's going on. If they're saying, "Oh no, that's not," they're not denying it. So we know something is happening. But this is the Goncalves family page. This is where they keep people up to speed and up to date. And as I mentioned, they've been incredibly vocal. They've wanted the death penalty for Bryan Kohberger. They wanted a trial. They've made it clear many times that they did not want a plea agreement, even if it meant avoiding a trial and having the death penalty taken off the table. And they posted on Facebook earlier tonight, "It's true. We are beyond furious at the state of Idaho. They have failed us. Please give us some time. This was very unexpected. We appreciate all of your love and support. Hashtag heartbroken. Hashtag Kaylee Jade forever." So they really are upset. How does a family deal with that, and how do prosecutors go ahead and go with a plea deal like this when at least one of the families is opposed to it?
Well, first of all, I look to law, right? Everything that prosecutors and defense attorneys do, and certainly judges, is circumscribed by state and federal law. The law does not say that victims and victims' families are a party to the prosecution. What they are is they are included in the conversations. They are sort of incorporated into discussions. They're kept apprised of all the proceedings, what is pending, what's going on, if something is calendared in court, if there is restitution that could be outstanding and owed, that type of stuff, so that they're not left in a lurch and left in the dark as to what's going on under that Marsy's Law, we call it. They have a Bill of Rights. However, they don't get to control the charges, and they don't get to control the outcomes, particularly in the state of Idaho. So what you do to comfort them is you include them in the conversations, and you explain to them why they are settling. And if we're honest, if we're all really honest, it is possible that a jury could have deadlocked on penalty. Remember, there was quite a bit of litigation and workup done on Bryan that he is living on the autism spectrum. And there could be one juror out there just waiting to be impaneled who could actually find that to be a significant enough mitigating factor to spare his life. And if that were the case, do you really want to retry the penalty phase? So what you have here is finality, and you explain that to the family, and hopefully with time, they might not be able to digest that and embrace that sort of unceremoniously and overnight, but hopefully with time, they will accept it. And something else that I've seen, Angenette, and prosecutors will weigh in on this as well, you'd be amazed how many people over time change their views about capital punishment, that at some point they kind of soften up. I don't know if it's because they have moments of faith where they look to the cosmos, they look to God or wherever, and they find some compassion or forgiveness for people, or they just believe that the government has no right or business in ending life, that the natural order of things is for people to die naturally and not at the hands of some type of what we call judicial homicide, namely from a jury. And hopefully with time, they will embrace these concepts because they will find peace with it. And they'll also know he is never getting out.
Philip, I want to bring in now to the conversation Sunny Slaughter. She has trained Homeland Security agents in the past. And Sunny, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I know you and I covered this back in the very beginning together. It's so wonderful to see you tonight. Tell me, if you would, your reaction, Sunny, to Bryan Kohberger apparently agreeing to plead guilty to 4 counts of murder in exchange for a life sentence and having the death penalty taken off the table.
First, let me thank you for having me on. You and I I literally was texting Alyssa. I said, oh my God, this is full circle. And being with you is absolutely full circle. And Philip, it's great to see you. I am trying to take this all in. There was overwhelming evidence, as both of you stated. This was a lot, but the crimes also, they almost became personal for me because it was so heinous and so graphic. And my first appearance. And let me say this. I was I'm a Florida Department of Law Enforcement instructor. And last week I was teaching my executive leadership class, and the Kohberger case was one of the 3 cases that we discussed, because this is such a critical case when it comes to law enforcement responding and interacting with the public and with families, and how a quiet investigation can happen. They were moving behind the scenes with the public, and the public was not aware, and the public really wanted answers, but I think it was to their benefit not to hold things close to the vest and to really conduct an investigation. One of the critical points that I made last week was the stop with Bryan and his father in the car, and the fact that during that stop, people, there was some complaints about, that it was a stop that should have happened, and I can't even get my words together. But the evidence for the murder that he threw away was actually in the car at that time. If you go back, he never left his parents' home as he was doing the throwaway of critical evidence that law enforcement found at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. That evidence was traveling with him down the highway. So law enforcement has got to be really proud of themselves in the way in which they handled this investigation. They handled the case. I know people didn't like it, but I think it was necessary. But I also understand how the family feels, and the fact that they don't feel like they were included in the conversation. But as Philip so eloquently said, you get to be a part of the conversation, but you don't get to control the conversation and the narrative. There is a process in place. So I think it's going to be incumbent upon the prosecutor's office to get with the family, the victim services, and to really have a conversation and a deep dive as to why they were not included in the conversation. And people need to understand that this is the way some things work sometimes. The death penalty, removing it off the table, we believed that there was enough evidence, that the DNA had already come back, that they had been working in silence and they had a solid case. And clearly they had the right person, because he has now taken the plea deal at the last hour. And I don't think he did it for the family. He absolutely did it for himself. But I think that is a part of the control and manipulation that he had all throughout. And like Philip said, his potential for not getting convicted and, being able to escape, the family really has to take a deep dive on that. And so does the entire public.
I want to put back up on the screen just to reiterate how upset Kaylee Gonclaves' family is. They wanted a trial, as I said. Let's take a look at that one more time. They tweeted, or pardon me, they posted on Facebook. It's true. We are beyond furious at the state of Idaho. They have failed us. Please give us some time. This was very unexpected. We appreciate all of your love and support. Hashtag heartbroken. Hashtag Kaylee Jade forever. I now want to go to a post from TMZ. This is very interesting. They're saying this is an exclusive, and I'm going to pull this up and share my screen on this. They're saying that Xana Kernodle's family also opposes a plea agreement, or at least part of her family does. The family of Xana Kernodle is livid over the plea deal offered to accused murderer Bryan Kohberger, and they told prosecutors they had better not go through with it.
Wow.
Kim Kernodle, Xana's aunt, who was so furious she was in tears, tells TMZ prosecutors floated the idea of a plea deal a few days ago, and the family made it clear, no way. When we spoke with Kim, she was on a conference call with prosecutors. She says prosecutors told her the defense approached prosecutors. The defense initiated this with a plea deal, and the prosecution went along to spare the families the pain of a trial. Kim says that's ridiculous because at least two of the families, hers and the Gonclaves family, wanted Kohberger to face a jury. So that raises the question, was the Chapin family in favor of a plea agreement? Was Maddie Mogen's family maybe in favor of a plea agreement? Kim says prosecutors were especially concerned that the families would have to see the gruesome crime scene photos of their loved ones, but she says, we know the graphics. They were not trying to spare us. Kim also says when her family got a call from prosecutors a few days ago about a deal, they were vague. Prosecutors never mentioned taking the death penalty off the table. What's especially puzzling, Kim says prosecutors told her there was enough evidence to secure a guilty verdict. Mm-hmm. As we reported under the deal, Kohberger will plead guilty to 4 counts of murder, and in return, prosecutors will take the death penalty off the table. There's a hearing scheduled for Wednesday. Presumably, that's when prosecutors and Kohberger will ask the judge to approve the deal. Kim Kernodle is saying she wants this decision delayed. So I guess, Philip, I'll go to your, it seems like at least the Kernodle family and the Gonclaves family were opposed. Philip, your response to that.
I want you to pretend that this is a civil case and not criminal. Let's just pretend that it's a wrongful death and that the family is suing. But Bryan Kohberger agrees to settle and is going to give them the max. If you analogize that to criminal, he has been sued by the state of Idaho for his liberty of a lifetime, and he is giving them the max. He is willing to settle. You don't have to prove it. It's all yours. You get your judgment. Not only do they get their 4 convictions, but he will never be released. If he ever tries to appeal, he's back to Jump Street on the charges, and he will then face a jury. Why would you want a trial when you've already prevailed without one? It's ridiculous if you really think about it. The only thing that they are being deprived of, the death penalty.
That's right.
That's the bottom line. Death or life without parole. And like I said earlier, that is not a decision for victims and victims' families to make. It is ultimately the decision of prosecutors and of course for the judge to accept that plea and to accept that disposition. And I don't think that any judge is going to reject a plea agreement merely because victims are dissatisfied with the penalty. He stands convicted and off he goes. So hopefully with time, they will be consoled by the fact that they really did prevail and that he is never, ever getting out.
Sonny, your thoughts?
I know they wanted to have a trial and they wanted the death penalty, but this is a death sentence for him. He is never going to leave where he is. He is going to die in prison. We don't know how soon or how long that will be. Neither do they. And as somebody who has lost my brother-in-law when he was murdered, and it took almost 7 years to get his wife for the conspiracy. She is in one prison now. She will go to another prison. Well, she will stay there for life. She will not get out. So there is more comfort in knowing. And I think the family, they have to get over the shock of it all. And I know they think they know all of the the things that happen in the house, but as a family member who has seen the very gruesome details of your loved one's murder, their bodies, and all of the things that you find out, it never leaves you. It never gives you the peace that you think it does because a person is on trial, because those images stay with you. I can still see them now. So I think the family has to take a deep breath. They have to take some time and really think about what it was, the outcome that is really needed. And that is for him to never, ever have the opportunity to do this to anyone again. We will never, we, the world, the community will never forget the beautiful, precious lives of all four of them, because their families will help us remember, and we will take this with us wherever we go. This is the case that has changed a lot of people, a lot of minds about the death penalty, and a lot of minds about when we send our children off to school. Mm-hmm. They did that. So they have, I think they just need the time.
I want to move on now to what you think, Philip, will happen at sentencing. If there's a change of plea hearing on Wednesday, do you think they'll do the sentencing at that point in time as well? Or because you don't really need a pre-sentencing investigation if you're pleading guilty and you're going away forever. So will they just do the whole thing on Wednesday and just wrap up this case once and for all?
I doubt it. I think they're going to take the plea and put it over for sentencing and victim impact statements. And that way you'll accomplish a couple of things. First of all, you'll let the dust settle between the time of the plea and the time of sentencing, and they can get their thoughts together as to how they want to address the court at sentencing and let them know what the effect of these murders have had on their personal lives. Something else the court can do, and I've actually done this myself during my career, and that is after a plea is taken in lieu of trial, we set it for a restitution hearing. And it's only heard by the court. It's done outside the presence of any jury. And the court takes evidence as to all the economic losses sustained by the victims and the victim's family. And what it does is it gives the families an opportunity to express themselves in court. They can kind of get it off their chest, what they've lost, what it's cost them. And sometimes it kind of eases the pain and takes the place of a full-on jury trial. And by doing it that way, they get their day in court, they're included, and they also get a judgment for civil restitution. And trust me when I tell you, they will tap into his prison earnings for the rest of his life. So the few times he might want to buy some special, hygiene products for himself, or some special comestibles from the commissary, like canned tuna fish or whatever they eat, in lieu of all that terrible high carbohydrate, high sodium, high fat food they give him, all that money is going to go to the family. And hopefully that will give the family some comfort that he's going to suffer by eating junky prison food for the rest of his life. And I know to you and me, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but trust me, when you're behind bars and the only thing you have to look forward to once in a while is a can of Star-Kissed tuna, it's a real treat. And it could provide some solace to the families, especially if they're given that chance to testify about it.
Sunny, what do you expect? I can only imagine when we do get to actual sentencing here, these victim impact statements will be so, I just can't even imagine. Just having watched some of these families over the last 2.5 years or so, almost 3 years, I think it will be very long. I think the sentencing hearing will be very long. It will be very emotional, but this will be their turn and their chance to really tell Bryan Kohberger, and who knows what impact it will have on him at all, if any, given the fact that they've said he has level 1 autism, which used to be called Asperger's. He doesn't show emotion. He's said himself in his Tapatalk posts, I feel nothing, basically. He's empty. So we don't even know if he's capable of feeling emotion or feeling much of anything. But this will be gut wrenching.